Hey there, beautiful souls. Before we dive into today's story, if you're enjoying these captivating tales of resilience and unexpected twists, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin our journey with Joyce. The attorney's office felt colder than it should have on that April morning. Joyce Matthews sat rigid in the leather chair, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. At 56, she had expected to spend the next decade traveling with Robert, watching their grandchildren grow and slowly easing into retirement. Instead, she was here, listening to the monotonous voice of Mr. Harrington as he read her late husband's will. To my beloved daughter, Amanda Matthews, I leave our family home at 1422 Oakwood Drive, all bank accounts held jointly and individually in my name, and the sum of $6 million from my life insurance and investments. Joyce blinked, expecting to hear what Robert had left for her next. Surely there was more. There had to be. To my wife, Joyce Matthews, I leave the cabin property in Pine Creek, including all structures and land therein. The cabin? That dilapidated structure they'd inherited from Robert's uncle years ago? The place they'd visited exactly twice in 30 years of marriage? Joyce's mouth went dry. This couldn't be right. Mr. Harrington, she interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. There must be some mistake. The attorney lowered his reading glasses, his expression a practiced blend of sympathy and professional detachment. I'm afraid not, Mrs. Matthews. I drew up this will myself at Mr. Matthews' instruction 18 months ago. Joyce turned to face her daughter. Amanda sat beside her, but the physical proximity did nothing to bridge the sudden chasm between them. At 29, Amanda had always been the apple of her father's eye, but this was beyond favoritism. Did you know about this? Joyce asked, searching her daughter's face for any sign of surprise or confusion that might match her own. Amanda's expression remained unchanged, her eyes cool and assessing. Dad and I discussed his wishes. He wanted to make sure I was taken care of. Oh, and I wasn't to be taken care of. The words came out more sharply than Joyce intended, but the shock was quickly giving way to indignation. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat. If I might continue, there are some stipulations regarding the transfer of property. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Joyce signed documents with trembling hands, barely registering the sympathetic glances from the attorney's assistant. 30 years of marriage, of building a life together, and she was left with nothing but a rotting cabin in the woods. Outside the office building, the spring sunshine felt like a cruel joke. Joyce stood on the sidewalk, disoriented, as if she'd wandered into someone else's life by mistake. I'll drive you home, Amanda said, not quite meeting her mother's eyes. Home, Joyce repeated, the word suddenly hollow. Is it still my home? Amanda's silence was answer enough. The drive back to the house, Amanda's house now, was silent and tense. Joyce stared out the window at the familiar streets of the neighborhood where she'd lived for 25 years. Each turn brought another memory. The park where she'd taught Amanda to ride a bike. The school where she'd attended countless parent-teacher conferences. The corner store where Robert always stopped for ice cream on summer evenings. When they pulled into the driveway, Joyce remained in the passenger seat, unable to make herself move. Mom, Amanda finally said, her voice softer than it had been in the attorney's office. You should start packing your things. Joyce turned to look at her daughter, searching for any trace of the little girl who had once clung to her skirts and begged for bedtime stories. How long do I have? Amanda's momentary softness vanished. The will stipulates that property transfers are effective immediately. I'm giving you 2 weeks. That's generous considering. Considering what? Joyce asked, bewildered. Considering the cabin is legally yours now. You have somewhere to go. Amanda checked her watch. A designer piece that had been a gift from Robert on her last birthday. I have appointments this afternoon. We can discuss logistics tonight. That evening, over a takeout dinner neither of them touched, Amanda laid out her vision of the future with brutal efficiency. You should take the furniture from your bedroom and whatever personal items you want. The rest stays with the house." Joyce set down her fork. "That furniture, all of it, Robert and I bought together. The china was my mother's. The art on the walls we collected over 30 years of marriage. And now they're mine," Amanda replied. Her voice wasn't cruel exactly, but matter-of-fact in a way that cut deeper than anger would have. "You'll need to adapt to a simpler lifestyle anyway. The cabin doesn't have the space for all this." "The cabin doesn't even have reliable electricity," Joyce said, her voice rising. "It needs a complete renovation to be habitable. Where am I supposed to live in the meantime?" Amanda shrugged. "That's for you to figure out. You've always prided yourself on being resourceful, haven't you? Now's your chance to prove it." Joyce stared at her daughter, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time. This calculating woman in expensive clothes was a stranger wearing Amanda's face. "Why are you doing this? What have I ever done to deserve this kind of treatment?" Something flickered in Amanda's eyes. Regret? Doubt? But it was gone so quickly, Joyce thought she might have imagined it. "It's not personal, Mom. It's business. Dad always said you have to look out for yourself in this world." She stood, gathering the untouched food containers. "I have an early meeting tomorrow. I'll be out of the house by 7. As Amanda walked away, Joyce remained at the dining table, surrounded by the life she was about to lose. The wedding photo on the sideboard, Robert's reading glasses still on his desk in the study, the marks on the doorframe tracking Amanda's height through childhood, all of it slipping through her fingers like sand. That night, in what had been her bedroom for a quarter of a century, Joyce couldn't sleep. She kept reaching for Robert's side of the bed, finding only cold sheets. How could he have done this to her? What had she missed in their marriage that would make him leave her so vulnerable, so alone? The question echoed in her mind as dawn broke. What happens now? The next 2 weeks passed in a fog of disbelief and frantic activity. Joyce packed her personal belongings, fighting tears, as she decided what would fit in the cabin and what she would have to leave behind. Each object carried memories. The quilt her grandmother had made, photo albums documenting decades of family life, kitchen tools worn smooth by years of use. Other family members and friends called, having heard about Robert's will through Amanda. Joyce was shocked to discover how skillfully her daughter had managed the narrative. "Amanda told us you wanted the cabin," her sister-in-law Patricia said over the phone, "that you were looking forward to a quiet retirement away from the city." "That's not," Joyce began. But Patricia continued, "She's been so worried about you, living all alone out there, such a devoted daughter." Similar conversations played out with friends and neighbors. By the time Joyce realized what was happening, Amanda had successfully painted her as an eccentric widow who had chosen isolation over family. Attempts to correct this perception were met with uncomfortable silences or gentle suggestions that grief was affecting her judgment. On her last night in the house, Joyce found Amanda in Robert's study, sorting through his papers. "I found the keys to the cabin," Amanda said without looking up. "I left them on the kitchen counter for you." Joyce leaned against the doorframe, suddenly exhausted. "Why did he do it, Amanda? Why did your father leave me with so little?" Amanda finally looked up, her expression unreadable. "Maybe he knew you better than you think. Maybe this is exactly what you deserve. What could I possibly have done to deserve being thrown out of my own home by my daughter? You were always the strong one, weren't you? Dad's rock, the practical, capable Joyce who could handle anything." Amanda's voice took on a bitter edge. "Well, now's your chance to prove how capable you really are." The next morning, Joyce loaded her car with as many belongings as would fit. As she prepared to leave, Amanda appeared in the doorway, impeccably dressed for work. "I've arranged for the utilities at the cabin to be connected in your name," she said, her tone businesslike. "The property taxes are paid through the end of the year." "How considerate," Joyce replied, unable to keep the sarcasm from her voice. Amanda's expression hardened. "You should be grateful. I didn't have to do that." "No, you didn't have to do any of this. That's what makes it so incomprehensible." As Joyce turned to leave, Amanda called after her. "Good luck in your new life, Mom. It'll be quite an adjustment for an old poor woman like you." The words hit Joyce like a physical blow. She got into her car without looking back, refusing to give Amanda the satisfaction of seeing her cry. The drive to Pine Creek took nearly 3 hours, each mile taking her further from everything familiar. The cabin was located at the end of a rutted dirt road, surrounded by dense forest. As Joyce pulled up, the reality of her situation hit her with full force. The cabin was worse than she remembered. The wooden structure sagged visibly on one side, the porch steps rotted through in places. The surrounding yard was overgrown, with tall weeds encroaching on what had once been a path to the door. Inside was no better. A thick layer of dust covered every surface. The furniture, what little there was, looked decades old. The kitchen consisted of an ancient stove, a rusted sink, and cabinets with peeling paint. The bathroom featured a clawfoot tub with suspicious stains and a toilet that made alarming noises when flushed. Joyce stood in the middle of the main room and finally allowed herself to cry. Great heaving sobs that bent her double, tears for the life she'd lost, for the betrayal by her husband and daughter, for the uncertain future stretching before her. When the tears finally subsided, she sat on the dusty floor, too exhausted to move. Night was falling, casting long shadows through the grimy windows. She should unpack the car, at least bring in her bedding, but the task seemed insurmountable. "I can't do this," she whispered to the empty room. "I don't know how." But as the words left her lips, a small, defiant voice in her mind answered back, "Yes, you can. You have to." Joyce took a deep, shuddering breath and pushed herself to her feet. "One step at a time," she told herself. "Clean one room tonight, just enough to sleep. Tomorrow, tackle the next problem." By midnight, she had cleared enough dust and debris from the bedroom to set up her air mattress. She fell asleep to the unfamiliar sounds of the forest, too exhausted even to dream. Morning brought no relief. The cabin looked even worse in daylight, every floor illuminated by the sunshine streaming through gaps in the roof. Joyce made a list of immediate problems: no running water, sporadic electricity, a leaking roof, possible structural issues. The list grew longer with each room she inspected. Over the next few days, she established a routine of sorts. Mornings were spent cleaning and organizing. Afternoons, she explored the property and assessed what repairs she could manage herself. Evenings, she huddled by the ancient fireplace, teaching herself to build a fire from instructions found on her phone. Grateful that at least the cellular service was decent, she rationed her savings carefully. Without access to Robert's accounts or investments, she had only her modest teacher's pension and what she'd managed to save independently. It wouldn't be enough for major renovations, but it might get her through until she figured out a long-term plan. A week after moving in, during a particularly thorough cleaning of the main room, Joyce noticed a floorboard that moved when she stepped on it. Curious, she knelt and examined it more closely. The board wasn't just loose, it looked intentionally cut to be removable. Heart suddenly racing, Joyce pried up the board. Beneath it was a small cavity containing a metal box, the kind used for cash or valuable documents. With trembling fingers, she lifted it out and found it locked. "Of course it's locked," she muttered, frustration momentarily overwhelming her curiosity. She was about to set it aside when she remembered something. Among the keys Amanda had given her was one that didn't match any of the cabin's doors. A smaller, older key that Joyce had assumed belonged to a long-gone padlock or shed. She retrieved the key ring from her purse and, after trying several keys, found the one that fit. The lock turned with a satisfying click. Inside the box lay several yellow documents and a sealed envelope with her name written on it in Robert's distinctive handwriting. Joyce stared at the envelope, her heart pounding. After all this time, here was a message from beyond the grave, perhaps an explanation for the inexplicable cruelty of his will. With unsteady hands, she broke the seal and began to read. "My dearest Joyce, if you're reading this, Then everything has happened as I anticipated. You're at the cabin, probably feeling betrayed and abandoned, and I owe you the explanation I couldn't give you while I was alive. First and most importantly, I love you. I have loved you every day of our 30 years together, and that love is precisely why I've done what I've done. When I received my diagnosis, I had to make difficult decisions about our future, your future without me. I knew Amanda would contest any will that didn't favor her substantially. You've always been blind to her faults, but I've watched our daughter become increasingly manipulative and entitled over the years. I made a calculated decision. By leaving Amanda the house and liquid assets, I gave her what she wanted most, immediate gratification. She's impulsive, Joyce. She lacks the patience and wisdom to manage wealth responsibly. What looks like favoritism is actually a test. One I suspect she's already failing. Now about your inheritance. This cabin is not the burden it appears to be. Look at the documents in this box carefully. This property has been in my family for generations, and there's a reason we've held on to it despite its dilapidated state. The mineral rights to this land and the surrounding 50 acres are extraordinarily valuable. Geological surveys conducted in the 1980s, included in these documents, indicate significant deposits of several semi-precious gemstones on the property. My grandfather knew this, but kept it quiet, fearing exploitation. My father continued the secrecy, and so did I. I've left you the true wealth, Joyce, not in a form that Amanda could easily squander, but in a form that requires exactly the qualities you possess in abundance: patience, intelligence, and resilience. Contact Marcus Thornton at Thornton Legal Services in Pine Creek. He has copies of these documents and instructions to help you navigate the process of assessing and potentially selling these mineral rights. The number is on the back of this letter. I know this path isn't what you would have chosen, and for that I am truly sorry. But I believe in you, Joyce. I always have. You have the strength to turn this apparent defeat into victory. All my love, now and always. Robert Joyce read the letter 3 times, emotions washing over her in waves. Relief that Robert hadn't simply abandoned her, anger at his manipulation, hope at the possibility of financial security, and a renewed sense of betrayal that he'd kept such secrets during their marriage. With shaking hands, she examined the other documents in the box. Just as Robert had written, there were geological surveys, mineral rights certificates, and land deeds dating back to the 1920s. One document, more recent than the others, appeared to be an unofficial appraisal, suggesting the mineral rights alone could be worth several $1 million depending on market conditions. Joyce sat on the dusty floor, surrounded by papers that potentially changed everything, and laughed until tears streamed down her face. The sound echoed strangely in the empty cabin, a release of tension and fear that had built up over weeks. The next morning, she called Marcus Thornton and arranged a meeting for later that day. The law office in Pine Creek was small but meticulously maintained, much like Thornton himself, a man in his 60s with sharp eyes and a measured way of speaking. "Robert told me you might be contacting me," he said after introductions were made. "I'm sorry about your situation, Mrs. Matthews. Your husband was concerned about how things would unfold. He certainly had a unique way of showing that concern," Joyce replied dryly. Thornton smiled faintly. "Robert was strategic in his thinking. He wanted to protect you while also teaching Amanda a valuable lesson. At my expense, perhaps, but he also left you with a significant opportunity." Thornton opened a folder on his desk. "I've taken the liberty of updating the geological assessments. The news is even better than Robert anticipated." Over the next hour, Thornton explained the options available to Joyce. She could sell the mineral rights outright for a substantial sum, lease them to a company that would handle extraction while paying her royalties, or partner with investors to develop the property herself. "Each option has advantages and risks," Thornton concluded. "I suggest you take some time to consider them. Meanwhile, I can introduce you to a contractor who specializes in historic renovations. The cabin itself has potential, regardless of what you decide about the mineral rights. Joyce left the meeting with a thick folder of information and, for the first time since Robert's death, a sense of possibility. On the drive back to the cabin, her cabin, she found herself noticing details she'd missed before. The beauty of the surrounding forest, the clear stream running along the property's edge, the way afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees. Over the next few weeks, Joyce threw herself into research and planning. She met with geologists, investors, and environmental consultants. She learned about sustainable mining practices and property development. She studied market trends for gemstones and minerals. Meanwhile, she began making small improvements to the cabin. With guidance from the contractor Thornton recommended, she learned basic carpentry and plumbing skills. She cleared the overgrown yard, repaired the porch steps, and patched the most critical roof leaks. Each night, exhausted from physical labor but mentally energized, she would sit on the newly repaired porch and update her plans. The folder of notes grew thicker, her vision for the future clearer. Occasionally, she checked social media for glimpses of Amanda's life. Her daughter posted frequently about exotic vacations, expensive purchases, and lavish parties. Reading between the lines, Joyce recognized the hallmarks of someone spending beyond their means, making impulsive financial decisions without consideration for the future, exactly as Robert had predicted. As summer turned to fall, Joyce made her decision. With Thornton's help, she negotiated a deal to sell the mineral rights for $12 million, with an additional percentage of future profits from extraction. The company she chose specialized in environmentally responsible mining techniques and had agreed to minimal disruption to the surrounding forest. The day the contracts were signed, Joyce sat alone in the cabin, now clean, functional, and increasingly comfortable, and wrote a letter to Robert that she would never send. "You were right about so many things," she wrote, "but you were wrong to think I needed to be tested this way. We could have faced this together, been honest with each other. That's what marriage is supposed to be. Still, I understand what you were trying to do, and I want you to know that I'm okay. Better than okay. I've discovered strengths I never knew I had, and perhaps that's the gift in all of this." As she folded the letter and tucked it into the metal box where she'd found Robert's message, Joyce felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since before his illness. The past couldn't be changed, but the future, her future, was now hers to shape. The transformation of both the cabin and Joyce herself continued through the fall and into winter. With her newfound financial security, she could have abandoned the cabin entirely, purchased a luxury condo in the city, and lived comfortably for the rest of her life. But something about the property had gotten under her skin, a connection to the land, a sense of accomplishment in her own resilience, perhaps even a strange gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. Instead of moving, she invested in thoughtful renovations that preserved the cabin's rustic character while adding modern comforts. Solar panels provided reliable electricity. A new well and plumbing system brought clean running water. High-speed internet connected her to the wider world. Joyce was careful to maintain the appearance of modest means to the outside world. The exterior of the cabin remained deliberately rustic. Her car, though now meticulously maintained, was still the same model she'd driven for years. She dressed simply when in town, becoming known to locals as that nice widow who's fixing up the old Matthews place. Only Marcus Thornton knew the full extent of her financial situation. Together, they established a comprehensive investment strategy, creating trusts for future grandchildren, donating to causes Joyce cared about, and ensuring her long-term security. Through all of this, Joyce had no direct contact with Amanda. Occasionally, family members would pass along news. Amanda had renovated the family home extensively. She'd quit her job to start a fashion boutique. She was dating a wealthy real estate developer. Joyce listened politely, but offered little in return, simply saying she was getting by at the cabin. As Christmas approached, the first since Robert's death, Joyce received an unexpected call from Patricia, her sister-in-law. "I'm worried about Amanda," Patricia said without preamble. "She's been acting strangely, and I think she might be in some kind of trouble." Joyce sat down slowly, an old familiar concern for her daughter rising despite everything that had happened. "What kind of trouble?" "Financial, I think. She hosted Thanksgiving at the house, and it was excessive. Catering that must have cost thousands, new furniture everywhere, champagne flowing all night. But then I overheard her arguing with someone on the phone about missed payments, and she asked if she could borrow money from us. Just temporarily," she said. Joyce was silent, processing this information. It aligned with what Robert had predicted. Amanda burning through her inheritance without thought for the future. "There's more," Patricia continued, her voice lowered as if Amanda might somehow overhear. "She asked about you, whether we'd been in touch, how you were managing at the cabin. She seemed, I don't know, almost guilty." After the call ended, Joyce sat in her now cozy living room, watching snow fall outside the windows. She'd planned to spend Christmas alone, still too raw from Robert's death and Amanda's betrayal to face family celebrations. But now, a new possibility presented itself, a chance, perhaps, for reconciliation, or at least understanding. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 3 days before Christmas, as Joyce returned from grocery shopping in town, she found an unfamiliar car parked outside the cabin. Sitting on the porch steps, huddled in an expensive but impractical coat, was Amanda. Joyce parked beside her daughter's car, her heart racing. She took a moment to compose herself before stepping out. Amanda stood as Joyce approached, her expression a complex mixture of emotions: embarrassment, defiance, and something that might have been regret. "Mom," she said, her voice smaller than Joyce remembered. "This is a surprise," Joyce replied, keeping her tone neutral as she climbed the steps, grocery bags in hand. "You'd better come inside. It's freezing out here." Amanda followed her mother into the cabin, stopping just inside the door, clearly taken aback by what she saw. Gone was the dilapidated interior she'd likely imagined Joyce enduring. In its place was a thoughtfully renovated space, simple but beautiful, with reclaimed wood floors, comfortable furniture, and a state-of-the-art kitchen visible through an archway. "You've done a lot with the place," Amanda said, clearly struggling to reconcile the cozy home before her with the hovel she'd imagined her mother inhabiting. "I've been busy," Joyce replied simply, setting down her groceries. "Would you like some tea? Coffee?" "Tea would be nice." Amanda removed her coat, revealing a designer outfit that looked slightly too flashy for a casual visit to a cabin in the woods. Joyce busied herself in the kitchen, giving them both a moment to adjust to this unexpected reunion. When she returned with 2 steaming mugs, Amanda was examining a shelf of books and photographs, including several showing Joyce with local friends she'd made in Pine Creek. "You look happy," Amanda said quietly, gesturing to a photo of Joyce laughing with the owners of the town's small bookstore. "I am most days." Joyce handed Amanda a mug. "What brings you all the way out here, Amanda? It's a long drive for a social call." Amanda's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. She took the tea, but remained standing, as if ready to flee. I need to talk to you about something." "I'm listening." "It's about the house. Dad's house. Our house." Amanda took a deep breath. "I might have to sell it." Joyce gestured for Amanda to sit on the sofa while she took the armchair opposite. "Why would you need to sell the house?" The story came out in fits and starts. Amanda had indeed been spending lavishly. Renovations, travel, a failed business venture, loans to friends who hadn't repaid her. She'd also made some disastrous investment decisions, encouraged by her boyfriend who had subsequently disappeared when the investments tanked. "I thought $6 million would last forever," Amanda said, staring into her tea. "It seemed like such an enormous amount." "Money has a way of disappearing when you're not paying attention," Joyce observed, keeping judgment from her voice. "The bank is threatening foreclosure if I don't make the payments. I took out a second mortgage to fund the boutique." Amanda finally looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I don't know what to do, Mom. I've made such a mess of everything. Joyce studied her daughter's face, seeing beneath the sophisticated makeup and designer clothes to the frightened young woman beneath. Despite everything, her heart ached for Amanda's distress. What are you asking me for exactly? Joyce asked gently. I don't know. Amanda's voice broke. Help? Advice? I know I don't deserve either after how I treated you. I didn't know where else to go. Joyce was silent for a long moment, weighing her options, considering what Robert would want in this situation, and most importantly, what she herself believed was right. I think, she said finally, that we have a lot to talk about. Snow began falling more heavily outside the cabin windows as Joyce and Amanda faced each other across the coffee table. The comfortable room felt charged with unspoken emotions and shared history. Before we discuss your financial situation, Joyce said, setting down her mug, I think we need to address what happened after your father died. Amanda tensed visibly, but nodded. That's fair. Why did you treat me that way, Amanda? We've had our differences over the years, but I never imagined you could be so cruel. Amanda's eyes dropped to her hands, which twisted nervously in her lap. I was angry, she said finally, not just at you, at everything. At Dad for dying, at the universe for taking him, at myself for things I'd done that he never knew about. What things? It doesn't matter now. The point is, when Mr. Harrington read the will, and I heard what Dad had left me, it felt like vindication somehow. Like Dad was choosing me over you, and I needed that. I needed to feel chosen. Amanda's voice had dropped to a whisper. It was easier to be angry at you than to face my grief. Ah, so you decided to throw me out of my own home, to tell everyone I wanted to live in isolation. I know it sounds horrible now. It was horrible, but at the time, it felt like I was finally winning something. Amanda looked up, her expression raw with shame. I've had a lot of time to think about it since then, especially as everything started falling apart. I realized I was becoming someone I didn't like. Joyce absorbed her daughter's words, recognizing the painful honesty in them. Your father once told me that the true test of a person's character isn't how they behave when things are going well, but what they do when faced with their own failures. I'm failing that test spectacularly, Amanda said with a bitter laugh. I don't know about that. You're here, aren't you? That took courage. They fell silent, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the soft pat of snow against the windows. Joyce studied her daughter's face, seeing echoes of the little girl she had raised, the teenager who had rebelled, the young woman who had gradually grown distant, and now, perhaps, an adult facing her mistakes with newfound humility. Tell me exactly where things stand financially, Joyce said finally. Over the next hour, Amanda laid out the details of her precarious situation. She had approximately $800,000 left of her inheritance, with debts totaling nearly twice that amount. The house had a market value of about $1.2 million, but carried a $900,000 mortgage. Her boutique had failed spectacularly, leaving her with business debts and unsold inventory. Credit cards were maxed out, and several friends had disappeared after borrowing substantial sums. If I sell the house and liquidate everything, I might break even, Amanda concluded, but I'd have nowhere to live and no income. Joyce listened without interruption, mentally calculating options. When Amanda finished, Joyce rose and walked to the window, watching the snow transform the forest outside into a winter wonderland. Your father wasn't surprised by any of this, you know, she said quietly. What do you mean? Joyce turned back to face her daughter. It's time I showed you something. She retrieved the metal box from its new hiding place and handed Robert's letter to Amanda. As her daughter read, Joyce watched emotions flicker across her face. Shock, hurt, anger, and finally a grudging recognition. He knew me better than I knew myself, Amanda said when she finished reading, her voice thick with tears. And I proved him right in every way. He loved you, Joyce said gently. He just recognized your weaknesses. We all have them. So the cabin, these mineral rights, you're wealthy now. Yes. Amanda's laugh held no humor. The ultimate cosmic joke. I throw you out thinking I'm leaving you with nothing, and it turns out Dad left you the real treasure. She wiped her eyes. It's what I deserve, I suppose. This isn't about what anyone deserves, Joyce said firmly. It's about choices and consequences. Your father made his choices. You made yours. I've made mine. Now we all live with the consequences. What happens now? Amanda asked, her voice small. To me, I mean. Are you going to help me? Joyce returned to her chair, considering the question carefully. I'm not going to simply write you a check, if that's what you're asking. That would only continue the pattern your father identified. Then what? I have a proposal. Joyce leaned forward, her expression serious. I'll establish a trust to pay off your debts and save the house, but with conditions. First, you'll need to work with a financial advisor of my choosing to create a realistic budget and stick to it. Second, you'll need to find meaningful employment or return to school, something that gives you purpose beyond spending money. Amanda's expression was guarded. And third, you'll need to make amends, not just to me, but to anyone you've hurt or misled during this period. That includes correcting the narrative you created about my choosing to live in isolation. That's a lot to ask. Yes, it is. But I'm not finished. Joyce's voice softened slightly. In return, I'm offering you a chance to rebuild our relationship. I'm offering forgiveness, Amanda. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger serves neither of us. Tears spilled down Amanda's cheeks. Why would you do this for me after everything I've done? Because you're my daughter. Because beneath all this pain and poor decision-making, I believe there's the person your father and I raised you to be. Joyce reached across the space between them and took Amanda's hand. And because everyone deserves a second chance, but only one. Amanda squeezed her mother's hand, her tears flowing freely now. I don't know if I can live up to this. Neither do I, Joyce replied honestly. But I think it's worth trying. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white, a blank canvas, a fresh start. Inside the cabin that had become her sanctuary, Joyce felt a weight lifting from her heart. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time since Robert's death, she could envision a future that included her daughter. Stay for dinner, Joyce said, standing. We have a lot more to talk about, and the roads will be treacherous in this weather. Amanda nodded, wiping her tears. I'd like that. And Mom, thank you for not turning me away. That's not who I am, Joyce said simply, and I hope it's not who you are either anymore. As Joyce moved to the kitchen to prepare their meal, she glanced at Robert's photograph on the mantel. You were right about so many things, she thought. But maybe, just maybe, you underestimated our daughter's capacity for growth. I guess we'll find out together. Spring came to Pine Creek with an explosion of wildflowers and birdsong. The forest surrounding Joyce's cabin transformed from the stark beauty of winter to a lush green paradise. On the newly expanded deck, Joyce sat with a cup of coffee, reviewing architectural plans spread across the table before her. The past few months had brought changes she could never have anticipated when she first arrived at the cabin, broken and betrayed. The property was now the centerpiece of a carefully managed conservation project, one that balanced the extraction of mineral resources with environmental protection. The cabin itself had been fully renovated, with an addition that housed a spacious office where Joyce managed her newfound wealth and the foundation she had established. The Joyce Matthews Foundation focused on supporting women in transition, those facing divorce, widowhood, or other major life changes. The foundation provided emergency housing, financial literacy education, and small business grants. What had begun as a personal project had quickly grown into a respected organization with a waiting list of applicants. Joyce smiled as she heard a car approaching along the newly graveled driveway. right on time. Amanda had become surprisingly punctual over the past months, one of many small but significant changes in her daughter's behavior. Amanda emerged from her car, no longer the luxury vehicle she'd once driven, but a practical mid-range sedan. She carried a laptop bag and what looked like a bakery box. Her clothing was stylish but understated, her makeup minimal. Even her posture had changed, less defensive, more open. "Morning, Mom," she called, climbing the steps to the deck. "I brought those pastries from the new bakery in town. The owner is one of your foundation's success stories. Did you know that?" Joyce smiled, clearing space on the table for the box. "Elaine, yes. Single mother of 3 who lost her home in a divorce. Remarkable woman." Amanda set down the pastries and her bag, then leaned over to kiss her mother's cheek, another new habit that still surprised Joyce each time. "The meeting with the bank is at 11. I've prepared all the documents you requested, plus a few additional projections I thought might be helpful." Their working relationship had developed gradually over the winter months. True to her word, Joyce had established a trust to resolve Amanda's financial crisis, but with strict conditions. Amanda had sold her boutique's remaining inventory, paid off her credit cards, and restructured the mortgage on the family home. She'd also enrolled in a business management course at the local community college, focusing on sustainable entrepreneurship. Most importantly, she'd begun the difficult process of making amends. It started with a series of honest conversations with Joyce, progressed to correcting the false narrative she'd spread among family and friends, and eventually extended to repaying, where possible, the friends she'd borrowed from. Now, 6 months after that snowy confrontation in the cabin, Amanda worked part-time for her mother's foundation while developing a business plan for a venture of her own, one that would build on her fashion experience, but with a focus on ethical manufacturing and sustainable materials. "Before we get into the bank paperwork," Joyce said, pouring coffee for her daughter, "I wanted to talk to you about something important." Amanda looked up, a flicker of the old wariness crossing her face. "That sounds serious." "It is, but not in a bad way." Joyce took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about the house. Your father's and my house, I mean." "What about it?" Amanda asked cautiously. "I think it's time for you to sell it." Amanda's surprise was evident. "But we've worked so hard to keep it. The mortgage is under control now and it's a beautiful home with a lot of memories," Joyce interrupted gently. "But it's also a constant reminder of a difficult time for both of us. I think we're both holding on to it for the wrong reasons." Amanda was silent for a moment, considering. "Maybe you're right. It does feel heavy sometimes being there, like I'm living in a museum of mistakes." "Exactly. And you've outgrown that chapter of your life." Joyce reached across the table to touch her daughter's hand. "You're building something new now, something that's truly yours, not inherited or given." "Where would I live?" Amanda asked, but her tone suggested she was considering the idea seriously. "That's part of what I wanted to discuss." Joyce pushed the architectural plans toward her daughter. "These are the final designs for the guest house I'm adding to the property. It's a completely separate structure, with its own driveway and plenty of privacy. I was thinking you might want to live there, at least until your business is established enough for you to buy your own place." Amanda studied the plans, her expression thoughtful. "You'd want me that close?" "I would." Joyce smiled. "Not because I need to keep an eye on you, though a year ago that might have been my motivation, but because I've enjoyed having you in my life again. The real you, not the person you were pretending to be." Tears welled in Amanda's eyes. "I don't deserve you, Mom. This isn't about deserving. It's about family and second chances and building something better than what came before." Joyce squeezed her daughter's hand. "Besides, the guest house will be there regardless. My foundation work is expanding, and I'll need space for visiting board members and consultants. You'd be doing me a favor by occupying it when it's not needed for business." Amanda laughed, wiping away a tear. "You've gotten very good at making your generosity sound practical." "I've learned a few things about strategy from your father," Joyce replied with a wry smile. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping coffee and looking out over the flowering meadow that stretched between the cabin and the forest's edge. In the distance, a deer and her fawn emerged cautiously from the trees. "Do you think Dad would be proud of us?" Amanda asked suddenly. "Of how we've handled all this?" Joyce considered the question carefully. "I think he'd be surprised, in the best possible way. He set up a test for both of us, a test he thought he knew the outcome of. But we've both exceeded his expectations, I think. It's strange," Amanda said, watching the deer. "A year ago, I thought I had everything I wanted. The house, the money, the status. But I was more lost than I'd ever been. Now I have so much less, materially speaking, but I feel richer," Joyce suggested. "Exactly. Richer in ways that actually matter." Amanda turned back to her mother, her expression earnest. "Thank you, Mom. Not just for the financial help, but for believing I could be better than I was." "That's what parents do," Joyce replied simply. "We see not just who our children are, but who they can become." As they turned to the business at hand, spreading documents across the table and discussing the upcoming bank meeting, Joyce felt a profound sense of peace. The cabin that had once seemed like a prison sentence had become the foundation for an entirely new life, not just for her, but for Amanda as well. Later that afternoon, after Amanda had left for her class, Joyce walked the perimeter of her property. The spring breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers, and birdsong filled the air. Near the stream that marked the eastern boundary, she stopped at a small memorial stone she had placed there months earlier. Robert Matthews, beloved husband, father, and strategist extraordinaire. She had added that last part with a mixture of irritation and affection. For all his manipulation and secrecy, Robert had ultimately been right about what both she and Amanda needed, just not in the way he had anticipated. "You should see us now," she said softly to the stone. "Not quite what you expected, is it? But maybe better." As if in answer, a sudden gust of wind sent cherry blossoms swirling around her, a brief, beautiful storm of pink and white. Joyce laughed, lifting her face to the sun. The cabin in the woods, once a symbol of her abandonment, now stood as a testament to her resilience. The mineral rights that Robert had hidden away had indeed provided financial security, but the true wealth Joyce had discovered was in her own strength, in the community she had built, and in the renewed relationship with her daughter. From apparent defeat, she had crafted a victory more complete than Robert could have imagined. And in doing so, she had not only survived but thrived, creating a legacy that would extend far beyond her own life. As Joyce walked back toward the cabin, her home, she felt gratitude for the journey, difficult as it had been. The path that had seemed like punishment had led to purpose. The betrayal that had broken her heart had ultimately healed her spirit. Sometimes, she reflected, the most valuable treasures are found in the most unlikely places, buried beneath the floorboards of an abandoned cabin, hidden in the painful truth of a letter, or discovered in the renewed bond between a mother and daughter who had lost their way but found each other again. Hey there, beautiful souls. If you enjoyed today's story of redemption and hidden treasures, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tales that touch the heart and soul. Hit that like button and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Did Joyce make the right choice with Amanda? Would you have done the same? Your engagement helps our community grow, and I can't wait to share another story with you soon.